Hey everyone, this is the Dialectical Materialism House Party recording for February 4th, 2026, and we are continuing our reading of the Vietnamese text, the translation of the Vietnamese university text, Introduction to the Basic Principles of Marxism-Leninism, Part 1, and we are reading from Section 2, and we are continuing with my reading from Annotation 101. In the old preface to Anti-Doring, Engels explains some of the contemporary currents of science and philosophy of his era. Engels explains that Hegelian philosophy had been dismissed by a newer current of natural scientists, who dismissed, quote, the idealist point of departure and the arbitrary, fact-defying construction of the system, end quote. In other words, the natural scientists rejected Hegelianism because it was both idealist and was not built on a foundation of objective facts. Engels points out, however, that Marx, quote, was the first to have brought to the fore again the forgotten dialectical method, end quote, of Hegel. The dialectical method was forgotten in the sense that the natural scientists ignored and dismissed dialectics along with the rest of Hegel's philosophy. So, Engels is pointing out that one of the great contributions of Marx was salvaging the dialectical method from Hegel while rejecting the idealist and non-fact-based characteristics of Hegelian philosophy. Marx, according to Engels, proved that the dialectical method could be separated from idealism by, quote, applying the dialectical method in capital to the facts of an empirical science, political economy, end quote. This was the origin of dialectical materialism, the resurrection of the dialectical method, and the development of a dialectical method in a materialist and scientific form. The idealist characteristics of classical German dialectics and Hegelian philosophy was a limitation that needed to be overcome so that it could be utilized for scientific inquiry. Marx and Engels overcame that limitation and in so doing developed materialist dialectics. This system of dialectics is the most advanced form of dialectics in the history of philosophy to date. It is the successor of previous systems of dialectics, and it arose as a critique of the classical German dialectics. Engels said, quote, Marx and I were pretty well the only people to rescue conscious dialectics from German idealist philosophy and apply it in the materialist conception of nature and history, end quote. 2. Materialist dialectics. A. Definition of materialist dialectics. Materialist dialectics have been defined in various ways by many prominent Marxist-Leninist philosophers. Engels defined materialist dialectics as, quote, nothing more than the science of the general laws of motion and development of nature, human society, and thought, end quote. Engels also emphasized the role of the principle of general relations. As John Berda Sanderson Haldane noted in the 1939 preface to Dialectics of Nature, quote, in dialectics, they, Marx and Engels, saw the science of the general laws of change, end quote. Lenin emphasized the important role of the principles of development, including the theory of cognitive development, in the dialectics that Marx inherited from Hegelian philosophy. Lenin wrote, quote, the main achievement was dialectics, i.e., the doctrine of development in its fullest, deepest, and most comprehensive form. The doctrine of the relativity of human knowledge that provides us with a reflection of eternally developing matter, end quote. B. Basic features and roles of materialist dialectics. There are two basic features of the materialist dialectics of Marxism-Leninism. First, the materialist dialectics of Marxism-Leninism is a symbol of dialectics that is based on the foundation of the scientific materialist viewpoint. And now we read from Annotation 102. Remember that scientific in Marxism-Leninism refers broadly to a systematic pursuit of knowledge, research, theory, and understanding. See Objects and Purposes of Study, page 38. Remember also that materialism in Marxism-Leninism has specific meaning as well, which differentiates it from other forms of materialism. See Dialectical Materialism, the most advanced form of materialism, page 52. Here, materialism includes an understanding that the material is the first basis of reality, meaning that the material determines the ideal, though human consciousness can impact the material world through willpower and labor. See Nature and Structure of Consciousness, page 79. Materialism is also built upon scientific explanations, rooted in empirical data and practice, i.e., systematic experimentation and observation of the world. And finally, remember that viewpoint is the starting point of inquiry. See annotation 11, page 12. Thus, a scientific materialist viewpoint is a perspective which begins analysis of the world in a manner that is both scientifically systematic in pursuit of understanding and firmly rooted in a materialist conception of the world. Note, materialist dialectics contains 12 basic pairs of categories, 2 basic principles, and 3 universal laws. These are summarized respectively in Appendix A, page 246, Appendix B, page 247, and Appendix C, page 248, and explained in depth throughout the rest of this chapter. In this way, materialist dialectics fundamentally differs from the classical German idealist dialectics, and especially differs from Hegelian dialectics, as these dialectics were founded on idealist viewpoints. Moreover, it also has a higher level of development compared to other dialectical systems of thought found in the history of philosophy going back to ancient times. Such previous forms of dialectics were fundamentally based on materialist stances. However, the materialism of those ancient times was still naive, primitive, and surface level. Second, the materialist dialectics of Marxism-Leninism unifies dialectical materialist viewpoints and materialist dialectical methodology, so it not only explains the world, but it is also a tool humans can use to perceive and improve the world. Every principle and law of Marxist-Leninist materialist dialectics is both 1. An accurate explanation of the dialectical characteristics of the world, 2. A scientific methodology for perceiving and improving the world. By summarizing the general interconnections and development of all things, every phenomena in nature, society, and human thought, Marxist-Leninist materialist dialectics provides the most general methodological principles for the process of perceiving and improving the world. They are not just objective methodological principles, they are a comprehensive, constantly developing, and historical methodology. This methodology can be used to analyze contradictions. See annotation 119, page 123. In order to find the basic origins and motivations of both motion and developmental processes. Therefore, materialist dialectics is a great scientific tool for the revolutionary class to perceive and improve the world. With these basic features, materialist dialectics plays a very important role in the worldview and philosophical methodology of Marxism-Leninism. Materialist dialectics are the foundation of the scientific and revolutionary characteristics of Marxism-Leninism and also offer the most general worldview and methodology for creative activities in scientific study and practical activities. And here in the text, there in the annotation 103, there is a visual, which you should see on the screen right now. And I will just read the text that accompanies the visual. The principle of general relationships and the principle of development are the most basic principles of materialist dialectics. These two principles are dialectically related to one another. The following sections will outline the principle of general relationships and the principle of development, which are the most fundamental principles of materialist dialectics. These two principles are closely and dialectically related. All right, and I'm going to end the reading here and continue in our next recording with the continuation of annotation 104, which dives in greater detail into the principle of general relationships and the principle of development. There are also some pretty nice graphics that I will include. And what we are doing here at this stage of the text is we are beginning to seg from a review of Marx and Engels and Hegel more deeply into the Vietnamese approach. There's still a bit of review, or what I should say, that is that what this text is doing is dialectically interplaying or creating a dialogue between the European work and the Vietnamese work. So as we go further along in this section of the book, you will note, if you haven't noted it already, that the Vietnamese and the European work, that is the work of Marx, Engels, and Hegel, who fades into the distance, fortunately. I'm not a Hegel hater, but, well, anyway. Thank the gods that Marx and Engels came along and set that particular path correct, set it straight. Anyway, in the next section, we will go even more deeply into the interconnection between these schools of thought. And then the Vietnamese school of thought, I think, will become ever more predominant, which will be quite exciting. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this reading, and I will talk to you soon.